From the management console, you'll see that I've recently accessed certain AWS services. So if you see the service that you want to access, you can simply click on it from here. I'm trying to get to VPC. If you can't, you can always click on Services up here and then scroll down under Networking and click on VPC. Now, once you're in the VPC screen, your screen might look different, right? So you might have the default VPC still configured. You might have some subnets, default subnets that are configured. For the purposes of our example, I've went ahead and deleted everything so that we can start fresh. Now, from a VPC creation perspective, there are two ways of creating a VPC. You can leverage the wizard, and the wizard will help you because it will streamline things. It'll automatically create the internet gateway for you. It'll create a bunch of things. Let's take a look. Or you can do it manually. Let's take a look at the wizard first. So if I click on Start VPC Wizard, you'll find that you have 4 different configurations that you can leverage the wizard for. You can create a VPC with a single publicly facing subnet. You can do so with a public and private subnet. And then the other 2 options are essentially the same, except they have also the configuration of a hardware VPN. Now, for the purposes of our demonstration, we're not going to get into VPN, so we're simply going to create a VPC. Now, if I were to show you the steps to create a VPC using the wizard, it would go very easily and everything would be configured without knowing how we configured certain things. So I want to show you this next screen, even though we're not going to execute this from the wizard, just because, again, it's just going to go ahead and configure everything for you. So what it'll do automatically is, first of all, you're going to set the CIDR block for your VPC. Now, in our design diagram, this was 192.168.0.0 with a /16. You're going to go ahead and give the VPC a name, and then you're going to configure a public subnet, aka your DMZ. And for example, for us, it was 192.168.1.0 with a /24. You're going to select the availability zone preference. And then you're going to do the same. You're going to give it a name. You can keep it public subnet or DMZ, up to you. And then you're going to do the same thing for the private subnet, and you keep going down. Now, here's where it gets interesting. If you're going to leverage the wizard, then what you have to do ahead of time is go ahead and create an elastic IP address that can then be automatically associated with the NAT gateway that the wizard is going to create. And I'll show you in a second how you can get an elastic IP address from the VPC. But again, because we're not configuring this through the wizard, I don't need to do that. But if you were, then what you would need to do is make sure that you have an elastic IP address ahead of time, because otherwise, if you click down here, you'll find that you can't connect it to anything and the wizard won't allow you to continue. We're going to talk about endpoints later, but this is where you can configure an endpoint, for example, directly to Amazon S3 and configure it there. So again, the wizard gives you the easy button. You can very quickly create your VPC with all the different configurations with 2 subnets in here. Because our design calls for 3 subnets, and because I want to show you how everything interconnects, I'm going to use the manual process, because otherwise it's going to create the internet gateway, it's going to create the route tables, it's going to create everything automatically, and you won't appreciate what goes on behind the scenes. And I want to make sure that for the exam and for your own purposes, you're ready and you know how to go through this process. So let's go ahead and cancel here. Now, before I go ahead and create the VPC manually, if you're wondering where you can create or where you can get an elastic IP address, you can come in here under elastic IP addresses and simply allocate a new address. So we're going to go through this process, but I just wanted to complete the example that I was talking about earlier. Now, I'm going to go back here to the VPC dashboard, and what I want to do is come down here to where it says your VPCs, and then I'm going to go ahead and click on Create VPC. Now, the first thing that we want to do is give this VPC a name. For my purposes, remember my fictional company name is Wired Brain Coffee, or WBC, so I'm going to simply do WBC here. For my CIDR blog, and we're going to do 192.168.0.0 with a /16. From a tenancy perspective, we're going to keep it at default, which is shared tenancy. Now, if you wanted to have dedicated hosts in here, you can always, from the drop-down menu, select dedicated hosting. Again, we're going to go ahead and click on OK. And voila. We have now created the virtual private cloud. Now, while we've created the VPC, we haven't really configured anything in it, but this is the construct, the virtual construct of how you would create the VPC. Now, down here, you'll find more information on this VPC that you've just created. You can look at any flow logs. You can look at any tags. Tags are going to be important. Everything within AWS needs to have a tag. Every asset that you create within AWS needs to have a tag. Now, the importance of a tag is it allows you to then use scripts, use automation from a billing perspective. If you have everything tagged properly, you'll be able to know exactly who's consuming what. So if you've got your developers, your line of businesses, as your environment grows, and you need to do at least some form of showback or chargeback, without tagging, the AWS bill can be very confusing. With tagging, you can very quickly sort out the different assets for the different business units and then do showbacks and chargebacks. You can also leverage tagging for automation purposes, scripts, configuration management, and other, in order to streamline the management of your AWS environment. All right, so we've created the VPC. The next thing that we want to do is we want to create subnets. Now remember, we're going to create 3 subnets, 2 private subnets and 1 public subnet or a DMZ. So we're going to go ahead and click on create subnet. And the first thing that we want to do is, well, what's the name of this subnet? So for our purposes, we're just going to call this DMZ. Again, it's a public subnet. You want to make sure if you have multiple VPCs that you're selecting the right VPC to put this subnet in. From an availability zone perspective, from the drop-down menu, we're going to select 1B here. This will vary, again, depending on your view. This might change depending on the region that you're in. So for our purposes, let's just remember that the DMZ subnet is in 1B. From a CIDR block perspective, we decided that it was going to be 192.168.1.0 with a /24. And then we're going to go ahead and click on Yes, Create. All right, now we've created the DMZ. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for the other 2 subnets. This process is essentially the same. Create subnet, whatever you want to call the internal one. Let's just call, for consistency's sake, let's just call this DB, just because we're going to put the database server in there. Select the right VPC. From an availability zone perspective, we chose 1B, so let's go ahead and go with 1C for this one. From a CIDR block perspective, we decided 192.168.2.0 with a /24. And we're going to go ahead and create that. And we're going to do one more. And this is going to be our app subnet. Again, right VPC. From an availability zone perspective, we already chose B, we chose C. Let's go ahead and go with D here. And from a CIDR block, it was 192.168.3.0 with a /24. Create that. Okay, now we've got 3 subnets that we have created. We've got our DMZ, our publicly facing, and 2 private subnets. Now what we want to do is we want to create the internet gateway. Again, remember, the internet gateway is what's going to give access to the internet. So in order to do that, what we want to do on the left here is select Internet Gateways. And I want to go ahead and click on Create Internet Gateway. From a name tag perspective, this could be whatever you want. I'm going to call it Internet. And let's add a GW. Internet Gateway. You can also do IGW if you wanted to, but let's just go ahead with this. Now, this is very simple, very easy to create. Now, once you create it, you'll notice that this is detached. You need to attach the internet gateway to a specific VPC. Now, again, recall, if you were to go through the wizard, all of this would have been done automatically for you. So you wouldn't have seen this. You wouldn't have appreciated the fact that you have to come in here, create the internet gateway, and then attach it to the VPC. So again, I'm doing this manually so that you understand the process and the steps that are involved. So you can simply click on Attach to VPC. You can always right-click on it as well and click on Attach to VPC. We only have one VPC, but in case you have multiple, just make sure you're attaching it to the right one. And voila. We have now attached this particular VPC or this internet gateway to the VPC. Now what we want to do is we want to make sure that our subnets know how to route to the internet through this internet gateway. And to do that, what we want to do is we want to come here to where it says subnets or route tables. We want to create a route in order to route these, right? So you can always use the default route table if one exists. Now, for our purposes, again, I just want to show you the entire steps. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and click on Create New Route Table. And again, for this purpose, we're just going to call this DMZ since it's going to route the DMZ traffic through the internet gateway. We're going to make sure that it's associated with the right VPC, and we're going to go ahead and click on Create. Okay, so this is now created. What I want to do down here is I want to click on Routes. Let's go ahead and expand this a little bit so you can see what's going on down here. Now, right now, there's only one route in there. It knows how to get to anything 192.168.0.0. It knows how to route to anything in those subnets. So the .1, the .2, the .3, the .0, etc. It knows how to route inside this subnet with a /16. But it doesn't know if there's any internet-bound traffic, how to get out to the internet. So what I want to do is I want to help it. So I want to click on Edit, and then I want to click on Add Route. And the first thing that I want to do is I want to click inside of target. Now, once you click inside of target, you'll find that it automatically will find your internet gateway. So I want to find my internet gateway, and then I want to basically say how to route traffic to it. So to keep things simple, I'm going to give 0.0.0.0/0, basically everyone in the subnet access to the internet. So anything that is not bound for a 192.168 traffic is going to go out to the internet. And then we're going to go ahead and click on Save. And the other thing that we now want to do is we want to make sure that it has the right subnet association. So it's not enough that we created a route. We have to make sure this particular route is associated with the subnet. Otherwise, it won't route anywhere. So under subnet association, what I want to do here is I want to go ahead and click on Edit. And then I want to select the right subnet. As you can see, there's 3 subnets in here, but I want to give access to DMZ. So I'm going to go ahead and select DMZ. And then I'm going to click on Save. And voila. So we've got the right routes in there. We've got the right subnet associations. Again, here, if you wanted to do any kind of route propagation so that your routes are propagating, you can configure that in here. We're not going to talk about this at this point. And then we talked a little bit about tags. So at this point, what we've done is we've created our VPC. We've created 3 different subnets. We've created our internet gateway. We've created our route tables so things know how to flow. Before I start to get into creating a NAT and how NAT gives access to the internet, I want to show you kind of what we've done. So in order to test all of the configuration that we have done so far, we need an instance. Now, I'm not going to get into details on how to create an EC2 instance. We're going to cover that in a later video. So I'm going to streamline the process of creating an EC2 instance. So I'm just going to bring one up just for testing purposes. So under services here, we're going to go to EC2. And I'm going to go ahead and launch an instance real quick. I'm going to select a Windows instance. We're going to go with the free tier. So I'm going to go ahead and select Next. I'm going to keep everything pretty much at default here. I just want to make sure that I'm putting it in the correct subnet. So I want to make sure it's in the right VPC. From a subnet perspective, I want to make sure that it's dropped in the DMZ. I do want to give it an elastic IP address or a public IP address. I'm going to keep everything else at default, and then we're going to click on Next. I'm going to keep the storage the way it is, and I will give this a name. So from a tag perspective, this is going to be web01. It can go ahead and create a new security group. This is the correct rules that are in that security group. I want to be able to RDP to it. So I'm going to click keep everything the way it is. And I'm going to go ahead and click on Launch. It's going to ask for my key pair. I already have one. I'm going to click on I acknowledge. And then we're going to go ahead and allow this to create this particular instance for us. Let's go back into EC2 here. Now, this took about a minute to kind of create everything, and it's currently in a running state. However, it does take a little bit of time before it allows you to generate the Windows password. So while we wait for the Windows password, or for it to allow us to generate a Windows password, what I'm going to do is create another instance, which is going to be the DB instance. I'm going to put it into the right subnet, the DB subnet, but I'm not going to show you the process. It's essentially the same thing, and therefore we can streamline the testing process as well. All right, so the database server is being created. Let's see if we can now generate a Windows password so that we can access this particular instance. I'm going to go ahead and right-click on it and click on Get Windows Password. And voila, it's taking a little bit more time before it can generate the password. So we're going to go ahead and click on Cancel and give it a little more time before it allows us to generate a password. And while you see this is in a running state, it still says here initializing. So it's still doing some behind the scenes things to prepare this server for launch. All right, let's go ahead. You'll see here that the status check has kind of changed. So let's see if we can go ahead and generate a Windows password. I'm going to right click again, get Windows password, and voila. Now we need to choose the key pair that we've generated. And again, I'm not going to go through this process in depth here, but I'm going to go ahead and select the key that I have, the key pair that I have here, which will allow me to generate the Windows password. And again, This is the IP address that I can connect to. This is the username, and this is the password. I suggest that you keep these in a notepad while you're working through this demo, just because you probably are not going to be able to remember this password, right? So I'm going to go ahead and copy this information, and then we're going to go through and launch or session to this instance. Now there are two ways of doing that. You can simply select the instance that you want to connect to and click on connect, or right click it and click on connect, or you can very easily bring up your remote desktop client, put in the public IP address, and connect that way. So just to make things easier, I'm going to go ahead and click on connect. When you do that, it allows you to then download a remote desktop file, so it automatically launches it for you. The only thing that you would have to do at this point is enter the password. So let's go ahead and do that. And then we're going to go ahead and click on it. Connect. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and paste the password, the long password that I copied from earlier. And voila, it is now connecting to the server. And voila, we are now logged into Web01. Now you can always tell which server we're logged into by looking at the icon on the top left corner here. I've created that just to keep things simple and so that you know which machine we are connected to, because we're going to be RDPing into several different machines. So we've already tested the connectivity that we can connect to that server remotely over the internet. We've tested that. Now let's see if this particular instance has internet access. To do that, we're going to go ahead and launch Internet Explorer. And let's go ahead and go to Google. Bada bing, bada boom. We've got internet access in both directions. All right, now let's go ahead and see if the same is true for the DB server that we created. Now I've already generated the password. It's the same process again. I didn't want to bore you through the same process. And we want to connect to it. Now, in order to connect to it, remember, it does not have a public IP address. It cannot communicate with the outside world. So the only way to connect to it is to actually hop from this server onto that server. Now remember, that server is on the 192.168.2 subnet, but we need the IP address. So during the password creation, it actually gave me the IP address of that server, which is 192.168.2.108. So let's go ahead and connect to it using that. And it also gave me this password that I've already copied. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click on the Windows icon here. And you can either type in MSTSC, which will launch the remote desktop client, or if it shows up for you, you can simply click on the remote desktop client. We're going to go ahead and do 192.168.2.108. Administrator is the username. And we've copied the password, so I'm going to simply paste it. Again, same drill here. You've got the icon here that will display which server we're connecting to. Now let's test if this server has outbound internet connectivity. So I'm going to go ahead and launch Internet Explorer. And let's go ahead and go to Google. Now, as you can see, it doesn't have internet access. Now, in order to give it the granted internet access, we're going to have to leverage a NAT instance, network address translation instance, or network address translation gateway. And that's exactly what we're going to do in the next lesson.